The Timeshift.
Well, it looks like the Doctor's truly fluxed this week. What do you think about this week's episode of Doctor Who? Leave me a comment down below and I'll get back to you shortly. Whilst you're there, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today, it will do them a power of good. Now, on to the review. I won't lie to you, dear listener, I'm a little bit mixed about my feelings about this week's episode. I have to say that on balance, I think that I enjoyed it more than I disliked it. It's kind of a little bit more of a 60-40 split between the stuff I liked and the stuff that I didn't like. It's just that the things I dislike about this week's episode are things that really do not sit well with me at all, but we'll discuss that in a little bit more time shortly. For the here and now, we'll discuss the things that I really did love and enjoy about this week's episode. I have to say that I really did enjoy seeing the evolution of UNIT and seeing how it started and to where it is more or less in the modern day. To be honest with you, I would rather have had a whole episode dedicated around this, as I think that you could quite easily do something like that. You know, you could easily have an episode where an alien's gone back in time to stop UNIT from forming. It would be a nice little bit of fan service, some world building, a little tip in the cap to previous incarnations of it. It would have been fun, but what we get here is perfectly fine for what it is. I have to really take my hat off to anyone who can try and take straw and turn it into gold as far as how stupidly, needlessly complicated the timeline of UNIT really is, but that is a video for a whole other time. It was great to have what we had. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a massive fan of the world building in modern Doctor Who at the best of times, but what we got here was fine, perfectly fine for what it is, and we'll probably see a little bit more about it next week and probably in the future specials what we come over the next few months or so. It was really great to see Kevin McNally back in the show again. I was really curious as to whether we would see him this week or not after last week's review, and here he is, he's back again. Even if, admittedly, it looks like he's been rather pushed to one side, much how Yaz and Dan were, but we'll discuss that shortly. And this episode itself was a hell of a lot more focused than the episode that we had before last, which was functionally doing the same kind of thing as this week's episode. This week's episode is a lot more about setting the stage and taking the bigger plot threads and storylines and really focusing down upon them, introducing new ideas and concepts and points of view that we can consider going forward as to this larger story arc. And this week it was a world more focused, mostly due to the fact that it was happening linearly, which makes it a hell of a lot more of an interesting and definitely an easier thing for us to digest. I will admit though, dear listener, it is hard for me to draw a definitive line between the wider story arc stuff and the story of this episode in isolation. Because let's be honest, we are effectively at the end of the season now, so all the plot threads are starting to converge at the end point, much as they would have done in previous seasons, whether that be in the Moffat era or the Russell T Davies era. It's all starting to come to a head. Yes, a lot of this stuff won't be resolved for maybe another year now as we start to transition into the specials territory, but it is what it is, and I will admit it does feel rather too soon to be getting into this stage things, but it is what it is. I'll have to say that I do feel that despite my upcoming issues with the executions of elements of this week's episode, I have to say that it was still fantastically well paced. It gave plenty of time for the information that we're being given to be properly delivered and for it to settle down within us. There were no moments where we were snapping away too quickly from one moment or to the other, and it never felt as though things were moving too fast or moving too slow. It made it a very enjoyable watch, and it was able to keep the tempo almost constantly throughout it, as well as helping by extension to keep our enjoyment levels up of it. Yeah, I won't lie that I enjoyed some parts more of this episode far more than others, but we will get onto that stuff shortly. I really did enjoy this stuff with Yaz and Jericho and Dan going globe-trotting. It had this really fun spirit of adventure to it. I think that the Chibnall era has been lacking in general, and I did have to say I enjoyed it. It felt like something that was very reminiscent of the Third Doctor's era, and particularly towards the start of it, where it felt like something a little bit akin to what we would have seen in the Second and First Doctor's time. Though if I'm going to be honest with you, I do wish that that would have been the focus of the episode. I really do wish that this week's episode had started where the last one had ended, with Yaz and Dan and Jericho just in the field, and then it's a case of right, what do we do now? Just suddenly having them in a whole new location in a different part of the world was a little bit disorientating for me. Sure, we did get an idea as to why they were there thanks to that hologram thing that the Doctor gave them. It's still hard to understand exactly how they got there and to that point. You know, who did they speak to? What did they read? What kind of historical document did they study to say, right, we need to be in South America at this point to find this temple, to find these things, so you'll tell us this prophecy? Because it could have literally told them anything. It could have been a prophecy of events that have already happened in the show at this point, but you know, it is what it is. Let's be honest, this big mysterious date that they're looking for, it's going to be the 5th of December, because that's next week, and that's when the episode this season ends. I really do, again, wish we'd seen more of it. This week's episode felt like a prime opportunity to have some adventures with our companions trying to do the Doctor thing, though with them being in the early 20th century. You know, maybe they had their own TARDIS, but it was just a blue boat. You know, stuff like that would have been really fun for them to see. It's almost like that Christmas special from a few years back where you had the guy who thought he was the Doctor. You know, just something like that would have been great to see, but we didn't get that. We did have hints of it here and there, which again I do appreciate, but it really just wasn't there enough really for me. As I've said previously, I feel that the constant cutting away that we had in this week's episode wasn't quite as obnoxious as what we've had in previous episodes. Though still, I will admit that the fact we're still doing and we're doing it as frequently is starting to get on my wick. I'll just be here and say that there were frequently moments in this week's episode where I was just there. I was really invested in the scene, really invested in the moment. Even if I might not like the way that the mystery itself is unfolding, I still want to understand it, as even beyond doing these reviews, you know, I want to understand it. But then all of a sudden, here's Belle doing something, and then here's Vinda doing something else, and then here we go, it's off to Dan and Yaz and to Jericho, and then back to the Doctor just constantly snapping and clicking and going to different places. I really didn't like. As if nothing else, it just feels like a hell of a lot of different plates for us as audience members to have to be juggling. Because these plot threads are not simple things to understand. This isn't like a soap opera or some kind of crime drama where you could expect different plot threads to be going on. We're talking about big space-time, wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff here. It's not something that you can easily digest on a sleepy Sunday evening. It really isn't. And after a while, it really does start to get tiring. And speaking of tiring, you know, I warned us all, I wanted to prepare you for this, but this week we get back into the Timeless Child stuff again. I knew it was coming. I've known it all along that this was going to be coming. Not because of some leak or another, not because of some kind of insider knowledge. It was always going to be the case that we're going to go back to the Timeless Child stuff. And here we have it again with us meeting the Doctor's mother figure. Which that stuff I'm going to reserve judgment on until we get all this stuff wrapped up, because I don't want to dismiss it out of hand. I want to take the time to actually go on the journey and just see where we end up with this. Because as I said last week, I am willing to be sold on this. I'm willing to be won over on it, providing the execution really lands and it's something I can just turn around and say, you know what? I wasn't into this to begin with, but now I like it. Or at least I accept it. Whether or not we're going to get that in the next few weeks or months, I really don't know. Because here and now, I'm going to be honest with you, I really don't like the Timeless Child stuff. And the more that we dwell on it, and the more we talk about it, the less that I like it. When we had that confirmation that, if ever we needed confirmation that the Doctor has had an innumerable number of previous incarnations, I just kind of felt really deflated at that moment. And I'm sorry, I know there's a lot of people that really love that Timeless Child stuff and all the doors that it opens up for them. And I get that. I truly do get that. But here and now, it isn't for me. And given that we're only realistically maybe 4 episodes away before this whole storyline arc wraps up, before the Chibnall era ends, I'm starting to get a little bit pessimistic as to whether or not he can win me over in the end with all this. Maybe he will, maybe we won't. If nothing else, it does make me get a little bit alarmed as to what they're going to do with Vinda and Belle, because, like I said last week, if it doesn't turn out that these two are the Doctor's real parents, then, What is the point of them? Why are we continually cutting to them? What's their purpose in the show? If this all wraps up with them just being a true love saves the day kind of deal, I ain't gonna be impressed. I'm really not. Of course, this week, for people who are obsessing about The Division, well, congratulations, you got some more stuff on it. I don't think it was necessarily worth it in the end, and as a whole thing, I have to say that it opened more doors than it really should, and asked more questions than it really did answer. Questions I don't think will ever get answered, but not in a way that is going to build up mystery so that the Doctor still remains mysterious. I just think that there's going to be a bit in next week's episode where Azure or Swarm is going to put the fob watch in front of the Doctor and say, "Now for you to learn who you really are." And then the Doctor's going to knock it out of their hands like, "No, I know who I am. I'm the Doctor and I represent truth, justice and peace and happiness and love and rainbows and sunshine. And I ain't got to join with you guys." You know, they're going to do some big defiant thing and the fob watch is going to get lost and we're never going to know. Or something like that. I'm just kind of befuddled by it. It just feels just such a big spaghetti twisted mess at the moment. Again, I'm open to being shocked. I'm open to the idea that maybe this will all turn out in the end. But here and now, I am just kind of a bit like, yeah, can we move on, please? Can we speed up Russell T Davies' return, please? Because I really don't like the way this is going. I think I need an adult, please, right here, right now. Help! You know, it just makes me think back in the Stephen Moffat era when we had the episode with, you know, the big fat blue guy had his head chopped off and he was put in a cupboard and then he was just there shouting to Matt Smith's Doctor, "We know who you really are, Doctor Who?" And I remember at the time thinking, oh Christ, please don't. And for a lot of people, you know, we were just all sat there like, oh, please don't let this be a thing that's going to lead on to big bad things that are going to ruin the mystery of the show. And in the end, it didn't. And here we are now. And I'm really worried where this is all going. As far as for more positives are concerned, I think that performatively, Whittaker, again, is doing a fantastic job as the Doctor. She's really coming into her own, which doesn't really help the comparisons that I have towards her and Peter Davison when he was in the role. First couple seasons, not really much of a muchness. Final season, you actually get a grasp on the role. You just kind of help that her character is being written as being a little bit more angstier and a little bit more angrier, and that adds a nice little contrast to what we've seen of her before, and it gives her nuance to the character, her interpretation of the character, which I really think she's desperately been needing. As to whether or not we'll still be seeing that in the next few weeks, or when she meets her companions again, I really don't know. As far as the core story stuff is concerned, it's really hard to discuss it because there isn't much there. It's about Jericho and Dan and Yaz trying to find information that's going to give them information. It's about them trying to discover something that's going to tell them what's going to happen next when it's fine, it's executed fine. I just wish we'd have seen more of them. You could quite easily have dumped the Belle and Vinda bit and then just had more time with them going on a globe-trotting adventure, and I think I would have appreciated that a lot more. I mean, again, I don't want to sound as though I'm ragging on Belle or Vinda because I think they're good characters, I think they're well performed, I think they're well written. It's just, I got no idea where that stuff is going, and I ain't excited about it because it either means it's going to turn out to be something of nothing, or it's going to turn into the biggest thing in the universe, and it ain't going to feel earned. But we'll soon find out. Next week is the final episode of this season, and we'll see where all that is going. For the here and now, however, let us get into Comment Corner! Okay, so our comment from last week's video comes from It's Kashi Kashi, who said, "Episode was great. I'm so happy to be enjoying Doctor Who again." And I have to say that I agree. I really am enjoying the fact that I feel a lot more invested in this run of Doctor Who than I have done in quite some time. That's not me ragging on Chris Chibnall or anything, it's just that this year's season has felt far more focused and a lot more interesting than what we've seen for quite some time. Sure, I have a few issues here and there, issues which I've been quite happy to vocalise, but still I think that on balance this season has been very good. I'll be interested to see where it all ends up landing, but that's just where we'll end up seeing. We'll all cross that bridge together when we get to there. But what about you, dear listener? What do you think about this week's episode of Doctor Who? Let me know in the comment section down below and I'll get back to you shortly, either directly in the comments themselves or towards the end of a future video, probably in next week's video when I do Comment Corner again, providing of course I get more comments. Thank you all for listening. See you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!